what obedience really means. The word obedience makes modern people feel uncomfortable. It sounds like weakness, submission, or betrayal of autonomy. We're often told that the highest good is self-expression, so to us, obedience often feels like surrender. But that reaction is more conditioning than it is wisdom. Obedience, properly understood, is not servility. Servility is more the surrender of conscience, while obedience is a discipline of will. Servility is often fear-driven, while obedience is purpose-driven. A good follower does not obey because he lacks judgment. He obeys because he understands that order precedes action, and that uncoordinated freedom is not freedom but fragmentation. Every complex endeavor, whether military units, surgical teams, orchestras, or monasteries, functions because individuals voluntarily restrain themselves for a larger purpose. That restraint is obedience. There is a paradox that modern culture avoids. Obedience makes meaningful action possible. Without it, every instruction becomes a debate, authority collapses, and institutions disintegrate, not because leaders are tyrants, but because followers reject discipline. Serious institutions train obedience first, not to create automatons, but to form people who act when necessary, not only when convenient. A person who never learned to obey cannot be trusted with freedom because more times than not, he confuses impulse with conviction and resistance with courage. Obedience is not about agreeing with every order, but accepting rightful authority even when it goes against your opinion. You obey because the rule exists, the structure exists, and because the mission requires it from you. Most people do not reject obedience outright. What they reject is obedience that requires humility. But obedience is a moral discipline which teaches you to distinguish preference from responsibility and teaches you to have restraint and to have trust in something beyond yourself. Every tyrant was once someone who never learned what it means to follow. Good followership is not docility, it is maturity. The good follower chooses restraint so that action can be meaningful and accept limits so that power, when it comes, does not corrupt him. If obedience disciplines the will, then loyalty disciplines allegiance. Modern culture treats loyalty as emotional, something you feel towards people you like. But serious institutions understand loyalty structurally. Loyalty is meant to be to the mission, office, or order, not personality. Personality-based loyalty destroys organizations. What happens when allegiances revolves around charisma? Everything collapses the moment the leader falters or changes. Professionals ask, what does this role require of me? Not, do I like this leader? The chain of command exists for clarity. Clarity of authority, responsibility, and accountability. Without it, power diffuses and no one is answerable or accountable. Trust must ascend or flow upwards before it descend or flow downwards. Followers extend professional trust to the office, not merely the individual. If trust had to be rebuilt from scratch with every transaction, no institution would survive. What loyalty means is that you do not undermine authority through gossip or perform skepticism for applause. This loyalty often sounds clever and reasonable, but it erodes trust from within. Loyalty isn't blindness. It means addressing problems within the structure, correcting upward rather than complaining downward, and refusing to turn tension into spectacle. This requires humility, the recognition that you may not see the full picture. Institutions usually fail through internal corrosion, not dramatic tyranny. Without structural loyalty, even the best leaders fight entropy. If obedience disciplines the will and loyalty disciplines allegiance, competence disciplines reality. Many fail not through rebellion, but through unpreparedness. In serious institutions, competence is not optional, It is a moral obligation. Ignorance is not neutral. Incompetence creates fiction, risk, and burden. Good intentions are not enough. You can be sincere and still be dangerous. Competence turns good intentions into trustworthy actions. A competent follower knows his craft. He anticipates needs, and he does not require constant supervision. When you accept a role, you accept the responsibility to be capable within it. Incompetence is often a form of disobedience, not always intentional, but negligent. Competence reduces friction, which allows leaders to think strategically rather than reactively. It earns trust quietly. Charisma attracts attention, while competence absorbs responsibility. Initiative without competence is chaos. It looks energetic but creates problems. Good followers act well, knowing when to step forward and when restraint is wiser. Competence requires humility, admitting ignorance, submitting to training, and enduring correction. Many fail not from inability, but from resisting discipline. But competence creates freedom. The more capable you are, the less supervision you require, and the more responsibility flows toward you. Without competence, obedience becomes fragile, and initiative becomes dangerous. Once people accept obedience and loyalty, they often assume good followership means waiting passively. That assumption is wrong. Initiative is not the enemy of order. Ego is. Organizations operate on intent. Orders are rarely complete, information imperfect, and time limited. Waiting for perfect clarity is often abdication, not obedience. The follower asks, given what I know and the mission at hand, what action best serves the objective? Initiative without loyalty becomes defiance. Initiative without competence becomes chaos. Initiative without humility becomes insubordination disguised as creativity. But disciplined initiative solves problems without fracturing authority. It adapts without undermining command. This initiative is quiet. It does not seek applause. It builds credibility. Leaders trust followers who act within intent and respect boundaries. Freedom is granted to those who have demonstrated restraint. And yet, restraint is not absolute. There are moments when obedience must stop. Obedience does not erase moral responsibility. Only those who take obedience seriously can take disobedience seriously when required. Moral courage is not theoretical resistance. It is the willingness to stand within a structure and say no when yes would be easier, and accepting the cost. Every legitimate hierarchy assumes a final loyalty beyond command, consciousness, truth, and moral law. A good follower understands this hierarchy. He obeys because order is good. He respects authority because it is necessary. But he refuses evil because obedience is not an excuse. Cowardice often disguises itself as loyalty. I was just following orders. That is abdication. Institutions decay when conscience is surrendered. But moral courage is rarely dramatic. It often looks like refusal, paperwork, delayed promotion, and isolation. The cost is what makes it meaningful. Only a disciplined follower can disobey well. Only someone who understands authority can resist without being destructive. True moral courage requires order. It requires people who know the weight of obedience and therefore know when it must be broken. Good followership is not compliance. It is moral adulthood. The way you follow trains you to lead. Leadership does not erase character, it reveals it. The resentful follower becomes the overbearing leader. The irresponsible follower becomes the anxious micromanager. Followership is leadership formation in slow motion. When you follow, you observe authority up close. How decisions are made, how pressure distorts judgment, and how responsibility weighs on people. Mature followers do not become cynical when they witness failure. They become discerning. They learn what not to imitate without rejecting authority itself. Those who never truly followed often treat authority as entitlement rather than burden. They confuse command with control and lack empathy for those beneath them. Good followers carry obedience into leadership, not as weakness, but memory. They remember frustration, confusion, and the cost of ego. That memory tempers them. Humility is accurate about one's limits and depends on others. Followership teaches it early if you allow it to. Those who obsess over leadership rarely becomes fit to lead. Those who take followership seriously often find authority entrusted to them without demanding it. Institutions recognize discipline, restraint, and reliability. Good followership is quiet. It does not flatter the ego. Civilizations do not collapse because they lack leaders. They collapse because no one knows how to follow, how to obey without civility, be loyal without blindness, act without ego, and resist without destroying order. Strong leaders are rare. Strong followers are rarer. And without them, leadership is noisy. The real question is not whether you see yourself as a leader. It is this: how do you follow when no one is watching? Because that is who you become.